And for more on this story, let's cross to Shashwat Saraf. He's the East Africa Emergency Director for the International Rescue Committee. Thanks for being with us here on France 24. We know that Africa depends on grain coming from Ukraine. What immediate impact will this have on people who are facing hunger on the continent?
I think the immediate impact that we will see is scarcity of food. We will see that there will be a problem of access to food, but also in terms of immediate hike in prices, which will reduce the affordability to food for people who are already marginalized. I think we need to remember, if we just look at East Africa, there are more than 50 million people who are extremely food insecure. They are dependent on food assistance, but also because of the 2 years of drought in Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, the floods that we see today in Somalia, in South Sudan, and the conflict in Sudan itself, which has displaced more than 2 million people. There is an increasing dependence on food, given that there is less productivity within these countries because of drought, floods, and conflict. So there is an increasing dependence, and at the same time, there is an increase in prices, which will actually make things worsen for the people who are very vulnerable across East Africa, but also many other regions in the world.
So in the short term, higher prices, but what are the long-term consequences if a deal can't be reached, let's say, several months down the road?
I think the longer term consequences, we need to remember that a lot of people will not survive now, but also a lot of children under 5 years old will be severely malnourished, which will have an impact as they grow. So it's very important that they have access to nutritious food today so that tomorrow their future is secured. Ukraine, as you mentioned, is the food basket for the globe. And there is a very strong dependence on food importation, but also for agencies such as the World Food Programme to be able to procure food from Ukraine and provide food assistance to the population. So we will see a long-lasting impact on the populations that will be affected today, and that will continue for years to come.
What countries in particular in Africa are most dependent on this grain and wheat and therefore the most vulnerable?
Countries such as Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan. I can talk about most countries in East Africa, which are very much dependent on the grain coming from Ukraine and will see the impact immediately if the deal is not resurrected soon.
Well, just for some context, why is Africa so dependent on this grain from Ukraine and Russia for that matter?
We need to look at a few things. First is that the climate crisis has complicated. We've seen that the production of grain in countries such as Somalia has reduced drastically over the years because of the impact of climate. In the last 10 years alone, in Somalia alone, we've seen 3 different drought crises, which have gone from anywhere from 12 months to over 24 months long. Thus, the dependence increases. On the other hand, I think also the conflict in different parts of Africa have created a situation where access to land, access to means of production have further limited production within the countries. The third, but not the least, I think there is a need for many countries to reflect and rethink in terms of the commitments that have been made within the African Union of investing more on agriculture, but also more on climate smart agriculture. I just want to point to the fact that we keep talking about climate crisis, and we know that a lot of countries, including countries such as Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, are not contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, but they are the ones who face the highest amount of brunt, and that has impact on their dependence on food to the external world and their dependence on food towards Ukraine.
So President Erdogan of Turkey was able to negotiate an extension to this deal the last time around. Before we let you go, I just want to ask you, are you optimistic that a deal can be reached this time?
I don't know if I'm optimistic, but I'm really very hopeful that there will be some ways that we will be able to tackle it. We will be able to resurrect it, because there is no reason why food and food supply should be interrupted, as they are a basic right, they are a human right, and for a lot of people across the globe, it's very vital that the global food markets are not disrupted.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Shashwat Saraf, East Africa Emergency Director for the International Rescue Committee. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24.